we do these events, and actually you need your elevator pitch. And I actually coach some people in Houston about this as well. And that is, you need to go up to someone, and before you do this, I said to the guys, I said, you can't just walk up and say, hey, I'm Seth Marlowe, the Treasury Whisperer. That's it. Great. Nice to meet you. Thanks. No, you need to say, why would it be valuable for them to have you in their network? So it's, I'm the treasurer and I have hosted this. I've got to know this number of treasurers. So help them to get to know you. And also another way we did it with Houston, I said to the guys, I said, you have to go and make at least 5 connections by this evening. And that is not just go click on LinkedIn. Oh, we're friends now. That's it. Great. You're in power. And actually, I thought at the time, this is a good way, trying to give them permission to actually speak to people. Everyone just dived in. And actually, everyone was given this permission to talk to other treasurers. And the evening was, I got a really great guy, Haroon, who came up to me afterwards. Mike, I've got 7. I said, what? He said, I've got 7. And in fact, I've got this other guy, 8. I've done 8. Because I said, you have to, before you leave tonight, get at least 5 new connections. When treasurers work at it, you guys are incredible. Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast. A little bit one with a difference. So normally I talk to treasury professionals about their treasury careers, where they started, where they are now, where they see themselves in the treasury profession go to next. But this one, it's a bit of a show with a difference. I am being interviewed by Seth Marlowe, more commonly known as the Treasury Whisperer. Seth was a guest of mine way back when, probably I think in the first year of the show, so about 5-6 years ago. Great guest back then. But Seth's moved onwards, and he's actually recently started his own podcast, the Treasury Whisperer podcast. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But he interviewed me, wanted to know about lots of different things happening in the Treasury market as a whole. So we had a good conversation, talked about lots of stuff. We're going to get back to normal programming next week, but this is Seth interviewing me. Hope there's some good advice there. Lots of advice for Treasury professionals about how to build their brands and everything else. I'm going to see lots of events, and we've also got episode 400 coming up very soon. Look out for that one. But yeah, and next week, back to a normal episode as well. All right. Enjoy the show. Thanks.
Hello, Whisperees. I'm Seth Marlowe, and welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, your go-to source for insightful interviews and dynamic panel discussions in the worlds of treasury, banking, payments, and fintech. Today, my guest is Mike Richards. For over 25 years, Mike Richards has been helping treasury professionals find roles where they can truly shine. As the CEO and founder of the Treasury Recruitment company, he doesn't just fill jobs, he helps build treasury careers and world-class treasury teams. Mike loves talking to the world's leading treasurers about their career journeys, the challenges they've faced, and where they see the treasury profession heading. His Treasury Career Corner podcast at www.treasurycareercorner.com is the outlet he uses to talk to the world's leading treasurers and gain their insights. You'll also find Mike on the Treasury speaking circuit at events like the AFP National Conference, Eurofinance, Windy City in Chicago, and T. Manny's New York Cash Exchange, or hosting a live Treasury Career Corner live. That's kind of redundant, Department of Redundancy department, folks. But you will find him at the conferences doing some of these live. Mike, welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast.
Thank you, Seth. Very grateful to be on here. But as I think I've said to you before the show as well, it's very weird being the other side of the microphone. Every time I get interviewed, and I do a few of them, it's you start to ask me a question. I'm like, no. I ask the questions around here. I got so used to it after, I started the Treasury Career Corner just over 7 years, or just coming on 7 years ago now. And I thought we'd do 10 episodes. We've done, just approaching 400 episodes, 400 separate interviews, 430 treasurers on there about their treasury careers. But again, it's still very weird to be this side of the microphone and you asking me questions. I'm like, no,
right.
That's the question.
That's right. In this Talkcast podcast, I think it is allowable for you to ask questions, but we'll try to limit that.
Okay.
All right. I think the work that you've done with the Treasury Career podcast has been absolutely remarkable. The stories that your audience gets to hear is just magnificent. We really do gain the insights from many, many years of the experiences that they've had. And I'm waiting for you to step into a global treasury role at some point.
I love the work that treasurers do, but sometimes I think, crumbs, what they go through, the pain, the stories, I just think Yeah, they're heroes in my eye. The things that they do and, they manage with these small treasury teams and the impact that they make is astounding, really. When you talk to them about, and how many are in your team? Someone in general finance, oh yeah, I've got 40 people, I've got 50. And you say to a treasurer, how many you got? Well, there's me and there's a couple of us, like a team of 3. And you're like, hang on, you do this for your global treasury? Yeah. I'm like, okay, then. You just think they do so much. I mean, everyone talks about AI and things. I think this is an opportunity for them, for treasury professionals, to be able to do more, not with any less. They've already got less.
Right.
But actually, to actually hopefully get themselves out of the day-to-day a little bit more. I mean, it's not going to replace people. We've talked about this. And when people say, oh, he's replaced, it's not. It's a tool, and so is a hammer. A hammer can be a dangerous weapon. It can also can build a beautiful house and everything else. So it's a tool if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, I think it's also going to separate the proverbial men from the boys, and those that actually can do more with the analytical side and to actually get behind the numbers and behind the transactions is really going to be the differentiating factor between those that are really the stars of the profession.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you get started with Treasury recruitment? Why Treasury? Were you doing other financial areas of recruitment, or were you not even doing recruiting?
So I did a teaching degree and then fell into recruitment, as lots of people do. I did teaching recruitment, so for substitute teachers and things. A recruitment guy, they used to do our recruitment. He one day said, you should do finance recruitment. I was like, accountants? No, not really. I mean, it pays you twice as much money. And I was like, okay, where do I sit? Where's my desk? And then, so I showed up at Robert Walters and they said, we need someone to run our treasury desk. I said, what's treasury? They said, we don't really know. Okay, then this is back in the 90s. They handed me this list of people and I started to get to know treasurers. I quite quickly found that treasurers are the first to the bar, often the last to leave it, very sociable and very forward focused and the thinking. And I was like, I love you guys. And I thought, even then, I really enjoy talking to treasurers and what they do, the impact they have. Unlike, as we said earlier, some other areas of finance, which are perhaps not as forward focused, can make this great impact on a company. Say, I won't name and shame other areas of finance, but I just think treasury is the lead myself, and I just love it. Then, what was it, 2002? Yeah, so we're just approaching actually our 23rd anniversary. I thought I'd worked for Robert Walters, worked for a search firm, became Hydrogen Struggles. They wanted me to do global search work, but in other areas. And I went, guys, I love treasury. And so in 2002, I started the Treasury Recruitment Company. And since then, we've recruited across the world and we recruit right the way across. So right the way across the US, the UK and Europe, obviously with my lovely accent. It's not quite as good as Seth's, but we're getting there slowly. And we recruit on all levels, from treasury analyst to global treasurer. We offer advice. We do our global salary survey. Then, as I said, I started Treasury Career Corner 7 years ago. As we approach 400 episodes, we're over 200,000 downloads. It also gets CTP credits as well. I was approached by AFP, Pat Colkin, the new CEO, and he said, oh, would you consider doing a mini quiz at the end of each episode so that people can get CTP credits and it helps them with their career journey? I'm like, yes. And it just took off. So it's win-win, and I just love it.
Where do you see the demand for treasury professionals growing the most? Corporates, which I think is clearly your forte,
yes,
or, the banking world, the fintech world, because they too are part of this overall treasury world that we live in.
So in the early stages of my career, I used to do some banking recruitment. In fact, on a retained basis, we still do and have done in recent years. But that really has diminished because there's so many new entrants to the market. I think on the banking financial services side, I think it's quite a fragmented market. I think and I often get approached. I get approached daily by lots of banking guys who deal with treasurers. And they often say to me, oh, I can do treasury. I can make a move. I recently had Keith Gorb from Bristol Myers Squibb on my podcast, and he took a step across and down in his career from banking to be a corporate treasury professional. And he was fantastic. But he said, you've got to be prepared to do that. Not a step backwards, but a step downwards, if you like. He took a cut in salary because he thought, actually, corporate treasury is going to be right for me. But a lot of banking professionals who possibly could get into corporate treasury. But then when I say, well, look, you need to take a pay cut when eventually it gets done, they went, no, I don't want to take a pay cut. I'm like, okay, well, but do you have, so that maybe they do cash management. So do you do foreign exchange? Well, no, I don't touch that at all. Do you do treasury management systems? Well, no, I don't do that. I've never done that. And I'm like, guys, this is what the range and the breadth of what a corporate treasurer does nowadays is just astounding. And I think that is the mini barrier to entry to banking professionals. Is not negative about them, because they are great specialists at what they do. And I have the utmost respect for them. But actually then when I say, look, you can't make, or you're going to struggle to make that step across, if they, once they get that through, once they get that, an understanding of that, they often agree with me. And they're like, yeah, actually, I can't do that, or I don't have those, or, it's just a gap. If someone wants to retrain or do that stuff, then great, they can do it. Yeah, if that answers that a little bit. But yeah, but I do corporate treasury. So as I say, right the way across, Fortune 500, FTSE 100s, top companies, private companies, as long as it's corporate treasury, that's us.
Great. I'm curious also, differences with the U.S. market in terms of what U.S. companies and U.S. treasurers are looking for, qualifications versus, I don't even want to say Europe, but just rest of world.
Yeah. We're pro-education, and we've said that a lot. I mean, we've partnered with the AFP because we're like, if anyone wants to, we actually provide, we've got a partnership with those guys so that anyone who wants to study CTP, you can get a discount on study, because we want to support treasury professionals. Some of them say, oh, do I need it? I was talking to a lovely young lady the other day, and she said, should I get it? I was like, yes. And she was like, well, you didn't really think about that. I went, no, I didn't think about it. There's nothing to think about. Why would I think about it? It's like, if you can be better and have a rubber stamp of your level of experience. I said, did you get a degree? She was like, well, yeah, I did. I went and got my MBA. I said, so you believe in study then? Well, yes, I do. And I said, and what subject was it in? Well, actually, it was in economics and stuff. I said, well, why did you bother to study that? Well, because that was going to help me in my career, and now I'm in Treasury. And yes, I do lean back on that. I said, okay, so if you're going to continue within Treasury, do you think that would help you? Well, yes, it would. I was like, she was like, yeah, I've got to do it really, haven't I? I was like, yeah, I think it's a great rubber stamp of your experience. Again, within the UK, you have the ACT qualifications, the Association of Corporate Treasurers UK. And then across Europe, there are a number of different ones. There's some good ones over in the Netherlands. They've got some others, and there's different programs across Europe. And we're pro any of it as long as it, does that. We've got a partnership array. Well, we've got a small program that we're just starting, an education program, which will help people who are totally brand new to Treasury, like a day in the life of a treasurer. We're just working on that being released, that because what we do find is that a lot of the training providers out there are rather expensive, and we think there's a more inexpensive way to do it, support the profession. And we're doing that. Someone said the other day, but you're going to do it and I said, no, we do it to support. And the more that we pay it forward, that if I help someone who's a Treasury analyst now, they'll be a global Treasury unit. It used to be on a website, actually. I might bring it back one day. Today's Treasury analyst is tomorrow's group treasurer. And people said, oh, it's a bit corny. It's not. It's true.
It's reality.
Some of the guys I'm talking to now, I've placed them, recruited for them. I had Adam Richford on the podcast the other day. He used to be head of GE Capital Real Estate, and I recruited for him. And then I eventually moved him to Renewee, and he's recently become the global treasurer of Smith & Nephew, a large UK corporate. Been on the podcast 3 times, and we're just talking about, actually, I've known him as a candidate in 22 years ago. He was one of my first. I'm like, yeah, and now he's a global treasurer, and it's it's about helping and supporting the profession. That's the key thing.
What's the biggest shift you've seen in the industry over the last 5 to 10 years?
That's a good. Could you make that question a little bit wider and more
within Treasury professionals?
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Just or maybe actually, call it Treasury careers.
Yeah.
The progressions, the entry, the exits.
I think there's a lot of answers to it. I think one of the key things now is Treasury has become more recognized. One of the things when I was on with Jim Cates, who's just finished with the AFP, and Pat, they were talking about trying to push Treasury out as a profession, push it into universities, pushing it out there so that people get, I think still most people get into Treasury by accident. It's a non-planned career choice. They go, hang on, what's Treasury about? And, when I first started 20 odd years ago, people say, oh, you Treasury. So you recruit for the government, right? I'm like, no, this is for corporates. And this is this person who, looks after today's money in the future. And then people said, well, describe it. And I said, well, finance director looks after all of the finances, financial control today and backwards, tax guy, minimizing your tax bill, treasurer, today's money and the future. And I think that's one of the, to answer your question, I think that's where it's become more that the best treasurers out there have become in some ways slightly deputy CFO-like, not all the time, but a lot of the time, that actually the ones that I've seen more successful are when they go to their CFO and say, right, what can I help you with? And they might be overworked and they might have lots of things on, but they still go, put their hand up and say, right, how can I help you? What can I do? How can I assist you? And it's like they become the right-hand person. And by doing that, it not only elevates treasury within the company, also elevates their role. It's more interesting. I know in the past, and you may know Todd Yoder, great guy. Todd said to me at one stage, he was in his role, and I said, oh, you're treasurer. He said, well, I am treasurer, but I don't really do treasury at the moment. I was like, why? He said, well, I've got two great deputies, and we sit down and have a coffee once on the Monday morning, and then off we go, and they go on, do their stuff. I'm then helping with this. I'm doing supply chain. I'm doing insurance. I'm doing risk management, enterprise. And then eventually he's gone on to be a CFO because that's where he wanted to go. I don't think every treasurer has to go and be a CFO, but some of them do, and some of them love it. Some of them say, no, that's not my career path, and they don't have to. I think, treasury as a career is certainly evolved.
Yeah, I've always thought that the dynamic between the CFO and treasurer was a vital piece of the finance function actually operating well. And if that partnership doesn't really exist or it's not solid, it can make for rather treacherous ground. What kind of advice would you give to, I would say, mid-level treasury professionals that are trying to figure out how to make it up the ranks?
Listen to the Treasury Career Corner podcast. Listen to that. Get some great tips, and thanks very much. There you go. Sorry, I had to get that. Actually, seriously speaking, that's one of the things that I've realized from the show. I mean, Seth and I spoke before. I never thought we'd do so many shows, but each and every person that I talked to, people said, how have you managed to do these so many shows? And I said, well, I was at one of the Eurofinance conferences, and they said, well, you've done that. I said, look, within 10 feet of me, we've got 10 different treasurers, right? They're like, oh yeah. I said, they all do the same job. They've all got the same job title, do exactly the same way. And they're like, well, no, they don't. I said, no, because they work for a private company. They work for a public. They're debt laden. They're cash rich. They're centralized, decentralized. Each of these stories for all these treasurers, you and I will meet at AFP in Boston later this year. There'll be so many treasury folk, and everyone, what title has so many different variety? Everyone, there are lots of common things like the tools they use and some of the common approaches, but the commonality is as common as the differences as well, so how amazing and things like that. So going back to answer your question, long way of answering it is, I think by listening to the podcast, people can choose their career path. Treasury isn't just one straight line. You hear about squiggly careers, don't you? And things like that. You can move across different things. I was talking to a treasurer just today, and he's been in real estate, and now he's in heavy industrial. And he said, oh, do you think I'll, in chemicals? And I said, well, you can do, but you could move into a fintech. It's not a direct, easy move, but I said but there's also commonalities, what you've done in FMCG and consumer goods. You could do that. And he was like, oh, actually, yeah, I could do that. I was like, you've got the skill set if you want to use them. I said, it's more about the approach of the company, maybe the size. And actually, when I talked to him, we talked about the fact he could go and be a treasurer at a smaller group, or he could be maybe a deputy treasurer at a larger group and then develop his skill set from there. So I think, talking about mid-level as well. So you're a treasury manager today and you're listening to this podcast, it's just think about where your career path is going to go. I did a recent post, and I do a weekly video. So anyone listening, feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. But the reason I say that is I had a business coach. She said, right, you have to talk. And I was like, oh, God, do I have to? But basically on a Tuesday, we do a newsletter. On the Friday, I do my reaction to it, and I do a 5-minute video. And one I did the other day was about goal setting. I think too many treasury professionals get too much in the weeds. When was the last time you celebrated your wins? And Emma Hayward, she's amazing. She said, each week she sends herself an email, puts it in a little box, a little Outlook box, and it says, right, what have I done well this week? What have the team done well this week? Actually, in the other way around. And she literally, and so when the CFO just sort of swings past her, this, how you getting on? What's happened? So she go, right, so this month we've done this week we've done this. Like, she's got those things to hand. So she's selling upwards, if you like, selling her dream. But then I also think a lot of treasurers here listening don't take time to have a coffee with themselves. Sit down. Where's your 30-day, if you're going for a new job, you might say, right, what's your 30-day plan for Treasury? What's 60-day? What's the end of the first month going to look like? The end of the first quarter, end of 6 months, end of 12 months. You might ask that it's great, set the frame and stuff like that. But then once you're in the company, do you actually go back to that? Do you ever do that yourself? And a lot of people go, well, no, I'm just getting on and doing the day job. Well, if you're not going to set your goals for you and the team, how are you going to measure yourself? How are you going to measure yourself as you progress?
And by having all of that, when it comes to the end of the year, you've got your performance appraisal written. And we all know that most of the time we end up writing our own performance reviews and giving them to our managers.
What did I do in January last year? What were we doing? You look, and all you need to, and it doesn't take long, just put in a reminder, even if it's not weekly. I know that a couple of guys have said, I said, no, it's fine. Do it monthly. Just celebrate your wins. Just say, look, just email yourself or make a note of them. And then you can do just a quick search, say wins of the year. And you've got your progression of 12 months. But I think also some people will find is how many wins will there be? And are they real? Thinking, hang on, what am I going to win? My win's going to be from month 13 to month 24. How are we going to upscale this? I think a lot of people, as I say, Treasury, there's a lot of pressure on people, and I think they get pushed down into the weeds too easily, and I think that's unfair.
What do Treasury people do in terms of networking?
They are either brilliant or terrible. It's
no in between.
Not really in between. There's very little. I mean, people have said to me, oh, you're a natural networker. I'm not. I have to work at it. It's like, it is work. And actually, that's a good way of doing it. In networking, the word networking, there's the bit in the middle, which is work. And actually, it is work. When you and I see each other at the New York Cash Exchange, which is a brilliant event, everyone listening should be going there, and we'll meet there. And I've met at previous ones, and we go to other conferences. I did it with Summer Simmons and Nicole Meyer last year. We did a great session at AFP. And one of the great things that Summer said, so it was her credit, I'll give her some credit, a little bit, not too much. He talked about having a break, sometimes having a break, because she said, if you're doing it right, you will be quite exhausted. You'll be quite tired. So you've got to work that room. You've got to have an elevator pitch. You've got to go up to someone, talk to them. And I give this coaching sometimes when we do our Treasury Career Corner Lives, and for people listening. So do the podcast, but also we do live events across the US. I'm doing one just before New York Cash Exchange. So at 6 o'clock, we sit down with 3 treasurers, registration at 6:30, us to talk to them for an hour. And after 1 hour, and we always keep to the hour, because then we got networking drinks. And treasurers love Treasury folk. They love to network. A lot of the law firms, we usually do it at their venues, and they go, your treasurers, they love networking, don't they? And I was like, yeah, they go, no one left. I said, what do you mean? They went, nobody left. Normally, apparently lawyers, about 50% of them leave the room. But they said, no, we did at one of our London events. We had like 136 people. And they went, 8 people walked out. I went, yeah. They went, no, we had 128. We had no, I said, I know I had to work behind the bar for a bit. But we do these events, and actually you need your elevator pitch. And I actually coach some people in Houston about this as well. And that is, you need to go up to someone. And before you do this, I said to the guys, I said, you can't just walk up and say, hey, I'm Seth Marlowe, the Treasury Whisperer. That's it. Great. Nice to meet you. Thanks. No, you need to say, why would it be valuable for them to have you in their network? So it's, I'm the treasurer, and I have hosted this. I've got to know this number of treasurers. So help them to get to know you. And also another way we did it with Houston, I said to the guys, I said, you have to go and make at least 5 connections by this evening. And that is not just go click on LinkedIn. Oh, we're friends now. That's it. Great. You're in power. And actually, I thought at the time, this is a good way, trying to give them permission to actually speak to people. Mm-hmm. And Bridget Meyer, Redbridge, she came up to me and she went, that was brilliant. And I was like, why? She just went, everyone started speaking. It did go mad sort of thing. People were like, bum, 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 bum. Because I had to tell them, they would give them permission to network, because otherwise it's like small talk and you get a drink here and it's quite clink.
That's right.
Everyone just dived in. And actually everyone was given this permission to talk to other treasurers. And the evening was, and I got a really great guy, Haroon, who came up to me afterwards. He went, Mike, I've got 7. I said, what? He said, I've got 7. And in fact, I've got this other guy, 8. I've done 8. Because I said, you have to, before you leave tonight, get at least 5 new connections. When treasurers work at it, you guys are incredible. When you don't, you can fade into the background. And, I see it sometimes at AFP, Eurofinance, big conferences, they can be quite overawing, crumbs. Yeah, it is quite, and also with the greatest respect to all the exhibitors, you can find them, they're flocking to you. Hang on, look, give me your badge. Let's have a quick look. The fact is, you need to take time for yourself and be much more. And again, Somerset talked about it. I've talked about it as well. You need to plan your time. Which sessions are you going to go to? This is a work conference. It's not just, right, let's out of the office, let's go to the cocktail party. We'll do that later. Again, one of the working title we had for our networking session, which we gave on the first day of AFP in Nashville was, we had an official title. I said, that official title is rubbish. I said, my title was what not to do at AFP 2024. And it was like, and I said, right, hands up. Who here has been, this is your first or second conference? About 50% of the hands went up. It's like, oh, okay, great. So you got 50% newbies. Who's been coming here for like at least 5 or 6 years plus? And it was the other 50%. I went, great. You guys who have been coming here, talk to them. Just tell them about the fact it's a marathon, not a sprint. When when we do this thing, I do my event the night before in New York, I'm going to have to be careful that I'm not going to go crazy because I've got then another 2 days of the New York Cash Exchange. I can't do that with a hangover. Yeah, I can barely speak with a hangover. Yeah, I think that's one of the key things. So treasurers are great at networking, or they need some work. They need some hand.
So I often quote, I believe it's Jim Gilligan, who treasurer of, I think at the time it was a Midwest energy company. And he used to talk about internal networking.
Yes.
He would talk about go and sit down in somebody's office and find out, what do they do? What's their role in the organization? Especially in those other finance areas that are so closely aligned. Go talk to the controller. Go talk to the head of the tax department. Talk to the head of strategic planning. And it seems to be so much more difficult to have those conversations within the 4 walls of your own organization. But it's as essential, I think, perhaps even more so, to have success in the role as a treasury professional.
And just to add to that, and we actually covered this in one of our first newsletters, because it was an actual, what we do is each of the newsletters isn't just some PR, BS or anything else. It's actual real, because basically it's drawn from stories I have with candidates or with clients. One of the treasurers I was talking to was coaching a junior level treasury analyst or treasury specialist actually at the time. So really just starting out. He said, look, I really want to get my network going. How do I do this? He went, go and have a coffee. I was like, what? Just that? He said, no, he was quite over, well, how do I talk to the head of FP&A? He said, well, you don't have to talk to the head of. Go to the deputy, say, look, can I get a coffee with you so I can understand what you guys do?
Right.
And then he did a couple of weeks. He did about 3 weeks. He said, how many coffees? Oh, I've had 2. He said, right, you need to drink more coffee. Okay. He said, no. He said, you're just by doing those. He said, you need to do a minimum of 1, bare minimum, probably 2 a week. So he was like Tuesday and Friday, he'd do this every week. And suddenly he'd be meeting 8 people. And the next week, 8 people. Within 6 months, this guy he eventually got headhunted out of his role and went and worked for the CEO, or is like their sort of go-to Friday person, boom, 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 was just doing this because this guy had got to know everything and was actually onto their graduate program, and they're like, wow, this guy really knows it. I think the flip side was, I actually talked to the treasurer a bit later. He said, I started to drink more coffee. I was like, oh, right. He said, yeah, I didn't drink as much coffee as I should have done. I was like, oh, right. Okay. He said, yeah. And I've heard that from a few others that, again, this week's newsletter is about the spotlight on Treasury. Will it drift away? Well, when it's on Treasury and, you sometimes might pass your CEO in the corridor once, hi. And the last time you met them was at your interview. When was the last time you then talked to them properly? Unless you're in a crisis, the spotlight drifts away sort of thing. So actually if you want to keep Treasury in the limelight, in the spotlight, you've got to work at it. And it is work.
Our podcast is sponsored by ICD. ICD are an independent platform trusted by thousands of treasury professionals worldwide to manage short-term investments. One global treasurer recently told me it was one of the smartest technology decisions they've made. No license fees, rapid setup, and tangible returns. If you're looking for a smarter, simpler way to manage your liquidity, then head to find out more at our partners page, treasuryrecruitment.com/partners, and find out much more. Let's get back to the episode.
And that comes back to the elevator pitch, which is not build it once and forget about it. That's a continuously updated tool that you need to have.
100%. Yeah.
So with all of the treasurers that you've spoken to and interviewed on the Treasury Career podcast, what's the most surprising theme or storyline that's emerged for you?
I think there's a few different things. And again, you and I talked about this earlier, that they're not very good at their own PR. I think they do a great job, but they don't tell people about it. And you've got to sell, and it's not a case of telling everybody. You need to sell why you're making a difference. Does anyone know the difference you've made by implementing this RCF? We've talked about recording your wins and everything else. I think treasurers are very good at, and a lot of the time they'll be very good at helping their team along and, promoting from within sometimes and, helping their team get to the next, but are they doing the same for themselves? I think they sometimes can be too, what's the word, facing or whatever. They don't do enough for themselves. And I think that's a key thing as well. I also said to you before that, what's the word? I used to think I was a really good recruiter. And I was at the JP Morgan thing when I talked to 30 treasurers, national treasurers. I said, now I'm a brilliant recruiter. They're like, look at this confident person. And I wasn't. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'm not doing that. I said, I used to understand or used to think I understood Treasury. Now I really do understand Treasury because I've had 400 of your stories and tales drilled into me and I've learned from that and I've really taken that on board. But then what that's also taught me is the fact that a lot of people have never heard this story. The fact that, sometimes with podcasts, you've got your podcast going out there. What are your stats? How many people listen to it? We've got 200,000 downloads. Each episode now gets like 800 downloads. So I'm going, and in the past, you have all these popular podcasts that say, oh, we got 1 million downloads this week. And I'm like, wow, that's great for them. But the fact is, if I was to share an auditorium with 500 Treasury professionals listening to the story of that one treasurer, like my head would explode. But actually, that's what we do each and every week. And that's when I think that's what I've learned is that treasurers, need to push themselves forward and they need to be their biggest advocates. And I don't think they are. I think they do. They do a pretty poor job of themselves. The ones that do actually embrace that or actually get, train themselves to do that. Right. They go, Dana Latehold, ex-Peloton, NASDAQ. Now she's NASDAQ. She was live on stage with me and Chris Cochan from Endeavor in New York at our session a year or so ago. And she's talked about this publicly. She talked about the original episode. She has a number of coaches who coach her. And one is about her presentation skills. One is about her technical expertise. One is about, she's got 3 or 4 personal coaches. She invests in herself. Now, I'm not saying everyone can do that, but that's what she's done. As she's grown throughout her career, she's invested in herself. And that's been a worthwhile investment, because now she's the global treasurer of NASDAQ. Wow, this lady's, and she is incredibly impressive, amazing lady, but she's had to work, do the work, put in the work on yourself as well as for your, your treasury team and for your company. Are they always looking after you yourself? No, that's one of the other bits. No. And I mean, again, one of the other points is, and again, from one of the bits I've said this week is when's the best time to look for a new job? Yesterday. And before and I said, well, the fact is, I've just had a guy in Chicago, good friend. His company is suddenly shutting up shop. They're moving. They're not going to take anyone with them. And he was thinking, actually, this is a job, not till retirement, but, certainly for the ongoing future. And Lee, Bugs pulled out. Now it's great. He's going to get himself sorted somewhere else. That's fine. But he was like, wow, everything's changed for him.
That's
and
right.
It's not fair. He's been treated like trash. But the fact is, luckily, he's got over that. But I think you guys need, anyone listening, that you need to look after yourselves first. And because I'm not sure all companies, they're not always investing in you and your career. You need to do that for yourself and take responsibility for it.
That's great advice. I think we're going to get towards the wrap up here. So if you had to name a few dream guests who have not been on the podcast yet, who would those people be?
One is going to be your keynote speaker with you, Seth. New York
Yes.
Cash Exchange, Tony Massone. The funny thing for me is the global treasurer for Amazon, great guy. And I've known him for many years. I used to recruit for him at GE when he ran the CP program, the commercial paper program over in Paris. And I recruited for him over in his Paris office and things like that. So I've known him all those times and he's gone up. So he was one of the people. There are a number of different people. It's actually what's weird for me is I approach a lot of guests across UK and Europe, and we get a very different response. People are saying, "Oh yeah, they'll have heard the podcast. They really like it." I said, "Great. So will you be on the show?" They said, "Send me the details. I'll think about it." And then, all right, okay. Well, that's a maybe then. Whereas when I go to US corporate treasurers, it's a different thing, and it's much better actually. I really like it that when actually I go to them, they say, "Send me the details. We'll get a date booked in." I'm like, okay. I think there's a different ethos there as well. So if anyone's listening that is a corporate treasurer and wants to be on the show, I would love to have them on there. I think Tony's one. So yeah, in answer to your question, so Tony, any other treasurers really that have a story to, I've had some incredible guests over the time, just the list. When I look down now, I'm like, it's amazing. I just was name dropping all those different people like Dana Leithold. I've got Summer Simmons. I've got just Sherry and Nicole Speaks recently. She from JBT and Morel and stuff. And each and every one of them is just amazing. And there's just lots of great treasurers out there. Yeah, again, we're always looking for guests. So, I want people to keep on reaching out to me.
It's definitely a who's who of Treasury. It's for those of us that are listening to the early stages of my podcast. There's a lot for me to learn from you, Mike. Appreciate what you've been doing for us in the industry. One last question. I'll call it the bonus round here. What's one Treasury myth that you'd love to bust up once and for all?
We talked about this. I was interviewed on someone else's podcast and their content writer wrote, "Mike covers this boring niche." And I was like, I was incendiary. I'm like going, I was like, take this down, this is, I'm like, how, firstly, I just thought, it is a bit rude anyway. I think, the way they've written it. But more than that, Treasury is not boring. Treasury is the antithesis. It's the opposite end of it. Treasury is exciting. If you want to go and buy another company, if you want to do all this amazing stuff, who do you go to? You go to your treasurer. If you're faced with this incredible crisis or tariffs come along or there's geopolitical events and you're thinking, crumbs, how are we going to keep the company going? You go to your CFO, and the CFO turns to the treasurer and says, like, right, how are you going to help me get out of this? What are we going to do? Treasury is exciting. I remember I was at one of the Economist events and, I said, Treasury's cool. And they were like, well, yeah, Treasury's a new cool. I went, no, but it is. They were thinking I was being, a little bit jokey. I wasn't. Treasury is cool. I love it. And it's like, I don't think I could have done 400 conversations so far and ongoing with it. If it was boring, then I would have given up after 10, and I haven't. I just love doing it, and I just love sharing the different, journeys of treasurers.
Thank you, Mike. I think that the bottom line is, I think the quote for the session, Treasury is not boring.
That can be the headline. Thank you very much.
There you go. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in New York and then up in Boston at the AFP as well.
Today's episode of the Treasury Career Corner was brought to you with the support of our partners, ICD. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your short-term investments, ICD's independent portal gives you access to a full range of investment products, integrated analytics, and a simple centralized platform built specifically for Treasury. If you head over to treasuryrecruitment.com/partners, you can learn more, and we'll be able to connect you with the right person at ICD for both you and your business. Many thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for your continued support.